Cassandra had always dreamed of having a normal family. After years in foster care, the Turners' picture-perfect life seemed like a fairy tale come true. Felicity, with her dazzling smile and designer suits, was a successful realtor, while Gary, the gentle dentist, exuded a calming warmth. Their home, a sprawling colonial in a manicured suburb, was filled with the scent of potpourri and the quiet hum of contentment. Cassandra had her own spacious bedroom, a walk-in closet overflowing with clothes, and a sense of security she'd never known. At first, everything was idyllic. Felicity enrolled Cassandra in the best private school, showering her with gifts and praise. Gary patiently listened to her teenage angst, offering sage advice and a comforting presence. They were the parents she had always longed for. But as the months passed, a disquiet began to creep into Cassandra's newfound happiness. It started subtly, hushed whispers between Felicity and Gary when they thought she wasn't listening, a flicker of something unreadable in their eyes when they looked at her. The house rules, once lenient, tightened with an unnerving precision. "No going out after dark, Cassandra," Felicity would say, her voice a little too sweet. "We worry about you, and no friends over when we're not home," Gary would add, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "We just want you to be safe." Then came the prohibition. The basement. "The basement is off limits, Cassandra," Felicity announced one evening, her tone brooking no argument. "It's dusty and unfinished. Nothing for you down there." Cassandra hadn't even considered going into the basement before, but the sudden restriction piqued her curiosity. It was an old, stone-walled space, the door tucked away in a dim corner of the kitchen. She'd never seen it open, never heard anyone go in or out. But now, she started noticing things. Late at night, when the house was still, she'd hear faint shuffling noises from below, followed by whispers too indistinct to decipher. Sometimes a low, mournful whimper would rise from the depths, sending shivers down her spine. She also started noticing Gary's increasingly strange behavior. He would sometimes emerge from the basement in the late hours, his face pale and strained. He always carried his dental tools, carefully concealed in a worn leather bag. He would catch Cassandra watching him and quickly avert his gaze. "Just a little work I needed to catch up on, sweetheart," he'd mumble, his voice tight. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy, laced with unspoken tension. Felicity's smiles seemed strained, her eyes darting around as if she were constantly on edge. Gary's gentle demeanor was replaced by a nervous energy, a twitch in his jaw that Cassandra couldn't help but notice. One evening, Cassandra was in the living room when Gary walked in. He stared at her for an uncomfortably long time, his eyes lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. She started feeling like she was being watched, like there was someone just on the other side of every corner. The whispers from the basement grew louder, more desperate. Cassandra's sleep was haunted by nightmares of shadowy figures and muffled cries. She knew with a growing certainty that something terrible was hidden beneath the veneer of the Turner's perfect life. Driven by a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, Cassandra decided she had to know what was in the basement. One Saturday evening, Felicity and Gary announced they were going out for dinner. "Don't wait up for us, dear," Felicity said, her smile a little too bright. "We might be late." As soon as the car pulled out of the driveway, Cassandra's heart began to pound. She crept to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she reached for the basement door. It was unlocked. The air in the basement was cold and damp, heavy with the smell of mildew and something else. Something metallic and sickeningly sweet. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows across the stone walls. In the far corner, huddled together on the floor, were three figures. As Cassandra's eyes adjusted to the gloom, she realized they were teenagers, emaciated, pale, and utterly terrified. Their eyes, wide and vacant, were fixed on her with a desperate plea. They didn't speak, didn't move. They just stared, their silence more terrifying than any scream. Cassandra noticed something else then. Their mouths were strangely sunken. Before she could process what she was seeing, she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Her parents were home. Panic surged through her. She scrambled back up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut, just as she heard Felicity's voice. "We forgot my purse," Felicity said, her voice deceptively casual. Cassandra raced to her room. She lay on her bed, listening to her parents' muffled voices downstairs. She couldn't shake the image of the teenagers in the basement, their haunted eyes, their gaunt cheeks. The following days were a blur of fear and confusion. Cassandra tried to act normal, but her parents' eyes followed her everywhere, their gaze now filled with a chilling calculation. She knew, they knew, she'd been in the basement. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The faces of the teenagers haunted her waking hours. She had to do something. She couldn't just ignore what she had seen. Despite her terror, Cassandra decided she had to help them. She spent her days at school in a daze, her mind racing, trying to formulate a plan. She knew she couldn't go to the police. She had no proof, and she was afraid of what her parents might do. One afternoon, Felicity and Gary announced they had to leave for an emergency. "We don't know when we'll be back, Cassandra," Felicity said, her voice tight. "Just stay here and don't open the door for anyone." As soon as they were gone, Cassandra knew this was her chance. She crept back to the kitchen and opened the basement door. This time, she brought a flashlight. The teenagers were still huddled in the corner, their eyes wide with fear. As Cassandra approached, one of them finally spoke, his voice a raspy whisper. Don't hurt us," he croaked. Cassandra knelt down, her heart aching for them. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly. I wanted to help you. What happened to you? What are you doing down here? The teenagers looked at each other, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Slowly, haltingly, they began to tell their story. They had all been adopted by the Turners, one by one. At first, they had been treated like family, given everything they could want. But then things changed. They had started breaking the rules, getting bad grades, or simply questioning the Turner's authority. One by one, they had been dragged down to the basement and had all their teeth pulled out. After this, they were given less and less food and water as the new adoptees arrived. They told Cassandra that Felicity would take a team from the basement whenever a new one was introduced upstairs and take them to show them her incomplete housing developments. But the team would never return or be seen again. As Cassandra listened, a wave of horror washed over her. She realized the truth. The Turners weren't just strict or secretive. They were monsters, and she was their next victim. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Her parents were back. "Quick, hide," Cassandra hissed. But it was too late. The basement door swung open, and Felicity stood there, her face contorted with rage. Behind her, Gary was leading a young teenage boy into the house, his arm slung casually around his shoulder. The boy looked excited, oblivious to the horror that awaited him. "Well, well, well," Felicity said, her voice dripping with venom. "Looks like someone's been a naughty girl." She shoved Cassandra back into the basement, slamming the door shut and locking it behind her. "You should have stayed out of things you didn't understand, Cassandra," she said through the door, her voice cold and unforgiving. "Now you're going to learn what happens to those who don't follow the rules." The sound of Felicity's footsteps faded away, leaving Cassandra alone in the darkness with the terrified teenagers. The faint sound of Gary's voice and the new boy's laughter echoing from upstairs. The darkness of the basement became a suffocating blanket, pressing down on Cassandra's spirit. The initial shock and fear morphed into a gnawing despair. Each day blurred into the next, marked only by the diminishing rations, the cold dampness, and the growing certainty that she was trapped. Felicity and Gary descended into the basement daily, their faces masks of cold indifference. What started as verbal antagonism quickly escalated into physical threats. Gary, his eyes glinting with a disturbing light, would lash out with his belt, leaving angry welts on Cassandra's back and arms. Felicity, her voice dripping with disdain, would mock her, reminding her of her past in foster care, how no one had ever wanted her, how she should be grateful for the gift they had given her. The psychological torment was just as brutal. Felicity would parade in front of them with plates of steaming, fragrant food, juicy steaks, crispy fried chicken, colourful salads, knowing that Cassandra and the other teens could only watch, their stomachs twisting with hunger. Such a shame you can't enjoy this, Cassandra, Felicity would say, her voice laced with cruel amusement. But rules are rules, aren't they? Their own meals consisted of a bland, brown liquid served in a chipped bowl. It tasted vaguely of vegetables and something else, something unidentifiable and unsettling. They suspected it was made from scraps and leftovers, the parts of animals that no one else would eat. They ate it anyway, driven by a desperate need to survive. The other teens, already weakened and broken of spirit, retreated further into themselves. They huddled in the corner, their eyes vacant, their bodies tired. Cassandra tried to offer them comfort, but her own despair threatened to consume her. One night, in the dead of silence, Felicity descended the stairs, her face illuminated by the beam of her flashlight. She pointed the light at one of the younger boys, a frail teenager named Samuel. "Come with me, Samuel," she said, her voice deceptively gentle. "I want to show you something." Samuel looked at Cassandra. his eyes pleading for help. Cassandra opened her mouth to protest, but Felicity silenced her with a look. "Don't even think about it, Cassandra," she said, her voice hard. "He's going to see something very special." Felicity led Samuel away, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. Hours passed, but he didn't return. By morning, it was clear he wasn't coming back. The remaining teens huddled together, their faces etched with a new level of terror. That was the breaking point for Cassandra. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't let the Turners take anyone else. She had to find a way to escape, not just for herself, but for all of them. The thought sparked a flicker of defiance within her, a tiny ember of hope in the overwhelming darkness. She began to observe her surroundings, searching for any weakness, any opportunity. She studied the basement door, the stone walls, the single barred window near the ceiling. She listened to the sounds of the house above, trying to discern a pattern, a routine. But as she was formulating her plan, Gary came down one day, a sinister glint in his eyes. "I think it's time for a little dental work, Cassandra," he said, his voice soft and menacing. He grabbed her, pinning her to the cold stone floor. She struggled, but she was weak and emaciated. He forced her mouth open, the cold steel of his dental instruments sending shivers down her spine. "This is for your own good, Cassandra," he whispered, his breath hot and foul on her face. "You need to learn to behave." He injected something into her gums that numbed her mouth but did nothing to dull the terror. Then, with a sickening crack, he extracted one of her teeth. Cassandra screamed, the sound muffled by his hand clamped over her mouth. The pain was excruciating, a searing agony that ripped through her skull. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the blood that gushed from her raw gums. The other teens cowered in the corner, their eyes wide with horror. They were helpless, unable to do anything but watch as Cassandra struggled. When it was over, Gary released her. leaving her sobbing on the floor, her mouth a mess. He gathered his tools, his face expressionless. "That's enough for today," he said, his voice flat. "But there are plenty more where that came from." He left, slamming the door behind him. Cassandra lay on the floor, her body racked with pain, her spirit broken. But even in her despair, the ember of defiance refused to be extinguished. The pain, the fear, the loss, they fueled her determination. She would not let the Turners win. She would not let them break her. She would escape, and she would take the other teens with her. She had to. With Samuel gone, a heavy shroud of despair settled over the remaining teens. They were a motley group, bound together by their shared trauma and the chilling reality of their captivity. Each had arrived at the Turner house with hope, only to have it brutally extinguished. There was Emily, the eldest, perhaps 17 or 18. Before the Turners, she had been a street kid, hardened by years of fending for herself. She was cynical and guarded, slow to trust, but possessed a fierce loyalty to those she considered her own. Before the basement, she dreamed of becoming a mechanic, spending hours tinkering with discarded engines and sketching designs in a worn notebook. The Turners had promised her a stable home and a chance to go to trade school. A promise they swiftly broke when she was caught shoplifting for food, when they would barely feed her. Now, she mostly stayed silent, her gaze fixed on some distant point, her calloused hands perpetually clenched into fists. Then there was David, a quiet, bookish boy of 15. He had been adopted from an orphanage, his head filled with stories of loving families and happy endings. He was gentle and kind, with a deep well of empathy. He had always excelled in school, devouring books and dreaming of becoming a writer. The Turners had initially encouraged his love of reading, showering him with books and praise. But when he began to ask questions about the outside world, about the Turners' business dealings, they had quickly turned on him, accusing him of being too curious and ungrateful. He was the most broken of the group, prone to fits of weeping and haunted by nightmares of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of his mind. Finally, there was Ben, the youngest, barely 13. He had been abandoned by his parents as a toddler and had bounced from one foster home to another, never finding a place to belong. He was small for his age, with wide, innocent eyes and a perpetual air of vulnerability. He craved affection and acceptance, clinging to anyone who showed him kindness. The Turners had initially lavished him with attention, buying him toys and showering him with hugs. But when he wet the bed one night, they had become cold and distant, accusing him of being damaged goods and unworthy of love. He was the most vulnerable of the group, easily frightened and desperate for reassurance. Their pre-adoption lives, though vastly different, had all led them to the same desolate place, the Turners' basement. They huddled together for warmth and comfort, sharing stories of their past lives, clinging to the memories of who they once were. They offered each other what little solace they could, knowing that their survival depended on their ability to support one another. Cassandra, despite her own fear and despair, felt a surge of protectiveness towards them. She saw in their eyes a reflection of her own pain and longing. She knew she couldn't let them give up. She had to find a way to save them, to give them a chance at a life beyond the confines of the basement. But the obstacles were immense. The basement door was their most immediate challenge. It was a heavy, solid oak door, reinforced with steel plating and secured with multiple heavy bolts. It was clear that the Turners had gone to great lengths to ensure that no one could escape. Beyond the physical barrier, there was the constant threat of Felicity and Gary. They had made it abundantly clear what would happen if anyone tried to escape. "If I ever catch any of you trying to leave," Felicity had hissed, her eyes blazing with fury, "I will make you regret the day you were born. You will be begging for death." Gary, with his soft voice and gentle demeanor, was even more terrifying. He had shown them the tools he used in his dental practice. explaining in chilling detail how he could inflict unimaginable pain without leaving a mark. "I know all the pressure points," he had whispered, his voice sending shivers down their spines. "I know how to make you scream without anyone hearing." The threat of violence, coupled with the crushing weight of their despair, kept the teens from even considering an escape attempt. They were trapped, not just by the locked door, but by their own fear and hopelessness. Cassandra knew she had to find a way to break through their apathy, to reignite their hope. She had to convince them that escape was possible, that they were worth fighting for. But first, she had to overcome her own fear and find a way to outsmart the Turners. The odds were stacked against them, but she refused to give up. Their lives depended on it. Cassandra knew that any escape plan would require information about the house, about the Turners' routines, and about any potential weakness in their security. She also knew that she couldn't do it alone. She needed the help of the other teens, but they were still too afraid, too beaten down to take any risks. She decided to start small, with a seemingly impossible goal: to reach out to the new boy upstairs, the one they had seen Gary leading into the house. He was their only potential link to the outside world, their only hope of getting help. She had paid close attention to the layout of the house before she was imprisoned in the basement. She remembered a set of heating vents that ran through the house, connecting the basement to the upper floors. It was a long shot, but it was the only idea she had. She waited until the end of the night, when the house was quiet and the Turners were presumably asleep. She gathered the other teens around her, explaining her plan in hushed tones. "I'm going to try to talk to the new boy," she whispered. "I'm going to try to tell him what's happening here, to get him to help us." The other teens looked at her with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "It's too dangerous," Emily said, her voice trembling. "If they catch you..." "I know it's risky," Cassandra said, "but we have to try. He's our only chance." She crawled over to the heating vent, passing her ear against the metal grate. She could hear faint sounds from upstairs, the creaking of floorboards. But more importantly was what she couldn't hear: the muffled voices of the Turners. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak directly into the small vent. "Hello," she said. "Can anyone hear me? My name is Cassandra, and I'm trapped in the basement. You're in danger. You need to get out of this house." She repeated her message several times, her voice growing hoarse. She strained her ears, listening for any response. After what seemed like an eternity, she heard a faint sound from above, a muffled cough, followed by a hesitant voice. "Hello?" the voice said. "Who's there?" Cassandra's heart leaped with joy. It was working. "My name is Cassandra," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I'm trapped in the basement. The people you're staying with, the Turners, they are not who they seem. They're dangerous. You need to get out of this house." She quickly explained their situation, telling him about the other teens, about the basement, about the Turners' cruelty. She begged him to believe her, to help them. The boy listened in silence, his breathing growing more rapid. When she was finished, he spoke, his voice filled with fear. I don't know what to say," he said. "I don't know if I believe you, but something doesn't feel right here. They're being too nice. Please," Cassandra begged. "You have to trust me. Your life depends on it." "Okay," the boy said hesitantly. "Okay, I'll try to help. What do you want me to do?" Before Cassandra could answer, they heard a loud noise from upstairs, a door slamming shut, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. "Someone's coming," the boy hissed. "I have to go." The connection was broken. Cassandra scrambled away from the vent, her heart pounding in her chest. Moments later, the basement door crashed open, and Gary stood there, his face contorted with rage. "Who was talking?" he roared, his eyes darting around the room. Who was talking to the boy? The teens cowered in fear. their eyes fixed on the floor. No one spoke. "I know someone was talking to him," Gary said, his voice growing colder. "If you don't tell me who it was, you're all going to regret it." Still, no one spoke. Gary's rage reached a boiling point. He revealed his belt, choked in a clenched fist, and began to whip them, one by one. He lashed out with savage fury, striking them across the back, the legs and arms. Cassandra watched in horror as the other teens screamed in pain, their bodies writhing on the floor. She knew she had to do something, but she was frozen with fear. Finally, when Gary was exhausted, he stopped, his chest heaving. "I'll ask you one more time," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Who was talking to the boy?" Still, no one spoke. Gary spat on the floor and stormed out of the basement, slamming the door behind him. Cassandra crawled over to the other teens, her heart filled with guilt and remorse. She had put them in danger. She had gotten them hurt. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to help." The other teens looked at her with a mixture of pain and anger. "You said it was dangerous," Emily said, her voice brimming with resentment. "You said they would hurt us. Why did you do it?" "I thought it was worth the risk," Cassandra said, her voice trembling. "I thought it was our only chance." "Well, it wasn't," Daniel said, his voice bitter. "It just made things worse. Now they're going to be watching us even more closely." Cassandra knew they were right. She had made a mistake. She had acted rashly, without thinking things through. She had put their lives in danger. She looked at the other teens, their faces bruised and battered, their eyes filled with pain. She knew she had to regain their trust, to show them that she was truly sorry. She took a deep breath and began to speak emotionally. "I know I messed up," she said. "I know I put you all in danger. I'm so sorry. But I want you to know why I did it. I didn't have a good upbringing. I've never known a loving family. And every time I've tried to find one or become a part of one, they all would eventually turn on me. I'm sure you guys had the same experience. But the main difference between them and me is that I would love a family, and I would die to protect those that are innocent. After being with the Turners for a few months, they did the same thing to me. I want us all to escape. I want us all to become family and to escape this living hell together. She paused, wiping away her tears. I know it's hard to trust me right now, she said, but I promise you, I will do everything in my power to get us out of here. I will never put you in danger again without thinking things through. I will listen to your ideas, your concerns. We will do this together as a team. She looked at each of them in turn, her eyes pleading for understanding. After a long silence, Emily spoke, her voice softer than before. Okay, she said. We'll give you another chance. But you have to promise us no more reckless stunts. We have to work together, carefully, if we want to survive. The other teens nodded in agreement. Cassandra felt a surge of relief. She had won them back. She had regained their trust. I promise, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. I won't let you down.